You're good to go.
Welcome everybody today on Earth Day. It's great to have this this meeting, informational meeting. I'm Jorge Figueroa, Community Partnership Administrator of the Office of Climate Action, Sustainability and Resiliency of the County and City of Denver. I'm gonna pass it on to Bridget, who is gonna be in charge of the meeting today and also of shepherding this whole RFP process for the Climate Ambassadors Promotoras RFP of CASR.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Bridget Tete, and I'm going to be the, I am the RFP facilitator for the Community Climate Ambassador Promotoras Climacticas RFP, and we are glad to have you join us this afternoon. Thank you. Weena?
Yes, I'm here.
Do you want to introduce yourself before we go ahead?
Oh, sure. I'm good afternoon, everyone. I'm working in the background today, help to facilitate the meeting here and make sure it's recorded so you come back to it. I am the Manager of Communications and Engagement for the Office of Climate Action. And thank you everyone for joining us.
Bridget, would it be a good time to start, share my screen and do the presentation?
Yes, please go ahead.
Just give me a moment while I set up the screen share. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
So today's pre-proposal meeting is for the RFP 918800 for the Community Climate Ambassadors and Promotoras Climacticas RFP of the Office of Climate Action, Sustainability and Resiliency. We've done the introductions, then we're gonna do the project details. We're gonna go over some requirements, deadlines, and BidNet information, and questions and answers. We hope that this is an opportunity, probably the only opportunity actually, for folks who are interested in applying for the RFP to have a conversation, Q&A, with the project manager or with any other person from CASR other than Bridget. And so hopefully we can spend some good time on the questions and answers. In case that you have any answers related to the RFP, not answers, questions, hopefully we can clarify them today to help you in the production of an RFP application. I would recommend that as I go down the presentation and the slide deck, if you have questions, just jot them down and keep them till the very end for the Q&A section. And hopefully we will have time to answer all your questions. And if we don't, please also feel free to put your questions in the chat, and we will make sure to provide answers to all of your questions, either today or by writing through BidNet. In terms of the project details, this RFP is about a climate resilient neighborhoods engagement campaign that we wanted to be tailored to the community that the vendor serves. It involves increasing awareness of extreme heat and water scarcity in Denver's nest neighborhoods. So it's a campaign about, you can call it climate literacy, for example, in which it's going to be very important for the promotoras and the climate ambassadors team who are going to be doing outreach to the community and the neighborhood to teach and share information, but also learn from local folks and residents and youth about extreme heat and water scarcity in the neighborhood. And it's that engagement part that is going to be so important and so rich of this work, which is engaging with community-based organizations, with community members, with residents, with youth, not only to learn about the issues of extreme heat and water scarcity, but also to co-create strategies and solutions to actually increase the resiliency in those neighborhoods. So it has a component of education and literacy, and it also has a component on climate action, in which on year 2 specifically, there's going to be implementation of solutions. The scope of work provides flexibility on the focus areas that the promotoras and climate ambassadors programs can work around and advance. And these are all areas that are really important in the area of resiliency and adaptation for the city. And they are electrification and renewable energy, urban forestry, food waste reduction and composting, green business, and water conservation. And so, for example, on the solution side, the focus has to be on solutions in one of or more of these focal areas. The RFP also requires a training in which we are planning to fund up to 5 Promotoras programs of 2 years. The budget that we're providing is $250,000 for the 2 years for each Promotoras program. And we want to bring all of the Promotoras programs that get selected to come together and share their best practices, meet each other, know about their programs, but also very important to train. It's a 4-day training program, and it's meant to provide a baseline capacity for everybody involved with this RFP. And the idea is to really create some really good training modules related to engagement, public speaking, even statistics. We would do it together, specifically the specifics of it, but we would provide the trainers. And I think that it would be a great opportunity in terms of just the networking when we bring all of the 5 programs together. In addition to that, we really want to keep in touch. We want the Promotoras programs to be in touch with each other and to share what's going on throughout the 2-year program. And so we want to hear about lessons learned, and we just want to be able to have all the different Promotoras programs selected to be a resource for the other Promotoras programs, and to really create this longer term network, peer network of like-minded resiliency community ambassadors programs in the city that are championing the same things in terms of solutions, but also values of our office. Like I mentioned, the RFP involves a 2-year project. We're going to be selecting up to 5 contracts, 5 community-based organizations. And the budget is can cover up to $250,000. The scope of work for year one will involve a baseline survey of the population that you are going to be educating, doing outreach with. It will involve the training. It's a 4-day training that's going to be done within a week. The peer exchanges that are going to be quarterly, and engagement, which is really going to be the bulk of the work, of course. For year two, we expect the engagement is also going to be the bulk of the work. And we also expect the engagement to be with the same population that you engaged in year one. But this type of engagement is more on the action side. And so year one would be more on education, on extreme heat and extreme drought. And then by the end of year one, I would assume that the Promotoras programs are also already starting to talk about solutions. And then on year two, most of year two is going to be focused on solutions and implementation of solutions in those same communities where the campaign targets. And a very important component of year two is going to be the post-survey phase, which is when we actually go back to the population, to the folks that are participating in the campaign, and we survey them at the end of the program to see how well their climate literacy increased, and also to see how many solutions were implemented and how those solutions affected their quality of life and their pockets, if they did. To measure performance of the program, it's going to be really important to be able to do a good statistical analysis, to do pre and post campaign surveys, so that we can see whether or not there was a positive change in climate issue awareness, and also in the community level adoption of the resiliency solutions and strategies of year two. And also we want to know the number of touch points achieved through the different outreach strategies in the campaign. And like I mentioned, we only have 5 focal areas. And when you apply for the RFP, you need to choose at least one. You can choose more than one if you want to, but they have to be either electrification and renewable energy, urban forestry, food waste reduction and composting, green business, and water conservation. This is a quick bird's eye, 30,000 foot level overview of the timeline of the milestones of the contract. On the execution of the contract, at every milestone, you would receive, upon achieving each milestone, a percentage of the contract. And so, for example, for a $250,000 2-year contract, execution of the contract milestone, we would provide 20% of the total contract for that milestone. So upon signing this contract, the vendor would receive $50,000. The preliminary design is also 20%. And I think that that's when you would need to provide more statistical rigor to your plan, to your outreach plan. You don't need to do that for the RFP. We don't need to know any confidence levels or anything. But once the contract gets executed, between then and the first 4-day training program, it's going to be important, and that's going to be within 2 to 3 months. it's going to be important to submit a preliminary design that includes your survey, including the statistical analysis or methodology. And that's before the training program. And then the final design would be done with the instructor and the training program, and by getting feedback from CASER, from our office. And we just want to ensure that everything is done in the best way possible, and that you have all the resources that you need, and that also that you're not overburdened and overworked. And so we want to make sure that we have reasonable goals. And we also want to make sure that we're all using the same metrics, so that at the end of the day, we can compare apples to apples and oranges to oranges among the 5 different projects and Promotoras programs that we will be funding. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail into this, but I just wanted to give you a sense of what the preliminary design meant and what the final design meant, in case that you had questions about that from the RFP. And then in terms of requirements, the most important thing is the criteria that we'll be using to evaluate each of the RFP submissions. Your campaign strategies, the assumptions that you're using in your campaign, and your outreach goals are going to be the most important in terms of points. The experience that you have working in the target neighborhood, and your expertise in the area of being a trusted promotoras type of climate ambassador type of outreach program is going to be really important too. It's not necessarily that it's okay if you don't currently have a Promotoras program, but it's really important to show that you do have capacity to do a good, robust Promotoras program in the specific neighborhood that you're targeting in the proposal. The staffing and your staff, including staff diversity of your Promotoras team, is going to be important. And also the relevance of the focus area and of your proposed campaign to that specific neighborhood that your proposal wants to target. The budget is also needs to be reasonable, and needs to be well aligned with the different goals and strategies in your campaign. And we also have a workforce diversity and high quality jobs policy to really help advance more diversity in the workforce, and ensure to the extent possible that our under-resourced communities and youth and workers can get high quality jobs in the city. Bridget, can you go over the deadlines and the BidNet?
Yes. So the deadline for questions is May 4th by 5 p.m. And you need to use BidNet in order to submit the questions. We will post the responses to the questions on May 11th. And then the deadline to submit the proposal is May 27th by 5 p.m. Mountain Time, and it's actually supposed to be MST. So please take note of these dates because they're really important to us. Once the deadline for questions closes, you will not be able to submit any more questions. So you have to make sure that your questions are in by the 4th. And again, once the deadline for proposals closes on May 27th, you will not be able to submit your proposal. So please pay attention to these specific dates and make sure that you're able to submit your questions or your proposal before those deadlines. Everything is going through BidNet. So for your questions, you make sure you go to BidNet. And if any of you do not have membership with BidNet, please go to the BidNet link provided And once you go to the website, it's going to ask you to register as a vendor, and it's free. But they have other services that you can pay for, but for you to submit a proposal, you really don't need to pay anything. It's a free service. And if there should be any amendments or addendum to the RFP, we are going to post that on BidNet as well. So please pay attention to that and make sure you register as a member so you can get all the information that we'll be providing with regards to the RFP in there. Thank you. Any questions on BidNet and deadlines?
Hi, yes, if you do have a question, just go ahead and drop it in the chat. I will be able to unmute each of you individually. So if you have a question, just drop your name in the chat. If not, we can go on.
There are some other questions in the Q&A.
Here we go. Okay.
So I will go, I'm gonna go from top down.
Are we done with the presentation? If there are any specific questions about the BidNet process, I want to take those now. Otherwise, if there's more presentation left, we might be able to answer some of those.
I think we're done.
We're done with the presentation.
We're done. Okay.
Sorry, yes.
Okay. Yes. If you can see the questions, you can go ahead and start from the top.
Thank you. I didn't see anything about housing being a use or priority. That's probably a super important need and priority for many communities. How do you anticipate addressing that? Yes, we have allowable uses that by law, every investment needs to go through of the Climate Protection Fund. And this is a Climate Protection Fund funded program. And so the allowable uses are renewable energy, green jobs, adaptation and resiliency, environmental justice, climate justice, mobility, and efficiency, I believe. I mentioned all of them. And so the allowable uses that are included are within the scope of the focus areas that are included in the RFP, are within the scope of the allowable uses of the Climate Protection Fund. I think that housing is a very important issue, that we cover it through when we put an equity lens, and we work, I mean, with multifamily housing, we work with public housing, we work with single family housing. In a lot of the projects and programs that we have, it's to help with the quality of life by reducing their energy bill, for example, and water bill, and giving them more resiliency to clean energy. For this project in particular, we are focused on a campaign on extreme heat and extreme drought. And so there is a lot that can be done from the housing perspective in terms of the target population that could be selected, and also like the strategies that you provide, for example, on forestry, on water or energy. There might be so many different strategies that you can provide for public housing that might be very different than the ones for commercial buildings and single family homes, for example. And so all of those things, I hope that are taken into consideration, including housing, but this is not a program just targeting housing. So I hope that I answered your question. Other question, how will the promotoras interact with the rapid assessment that is being done? I don't foresee it to, well, the rapid assessments, we just completed one in Sun Valley, and it's a needs assessment in the 10 nest neighborhoods. I had not really thought about how they could interact, but I think that the rapid assessments can indeed provide a lot of information, really good information for the campaigns in terms of like the targeting the community or the community needs for the campaign. And once that rapid assessment information is out there, then you can use it, and hopefully it will be all of the 10 nest neighborhood rapid assessments are hopefully going to be completed by the end of July or July-August timeline. Can you focus your area of interest with more than one area? For example, food waste reduction and composting, plus water conservation in case of our work at revision. Absolutely, yes. That's like the cool thing is that you can also include urban forestry, right? With composting and water conservation, so that yes, you can choose one if you want to choose only one, but you can choose more than one if you want to. Most all of the work happen in nest communities, or can some of the work spill into adjacent neighborhoods, such as Cole and 5 Points adjacent to GES? I think the most important thing in terms of the nest communities is that the project is conducted in a nest community. If it spills over into another community, I think it's okay. But I think that it's how we have written that RFP, it's important for it to occur in one of the 10 nest neighborhoods. What is a sound statistical sampling methodology? Is there any technical support from the city of Denver to help understand what this is and develop this methodology? Yes, well, you're gonna have to get a statistician, and part of the support that the city is providing is in this RFP is funding. And so that's part of the funding from the signing the contract. How do you call that? It's not that, it's on the timeline, the milestone, the signing the contract milestone should cover the funding. That $50,000 should have in that budget funding for a contractor on the side of sampling methodology. And it's just important to do it sound, that it follows proper statistical science. And so that when we look at the, at the answers, we can know how much it represents the population and how much confidence we have in those answers. Will this RFP give more weight to organizations with partners? It's not in the criteria that I shared. That's going to be the only criteria that we're going to put weight on. And so I don't think that it's always great to partner, and I'm a big champion of collaboration, but it's also really good for an organization to be able to, have one RFP or one whole project fully funded for just one organization. And so we're open, and we really want to champion anybody who wants to apply, whether they want to apply just for the organization or they want to apply with a group of folks. I don't think that that's going to impact our decision in any way. Can you talk more about the experience applicants should have with the Promotora model? If we don't have a current Promotora model, will we be less competitive even if we have close ties nest community and priority populations. Wina, if you want to also talk about that, I can give you my perspective, but I would like, Wina, maybe if you can share a little bit of your perspective too, if you don't mind.
Yes, sorry, I was typing an answer to our last question there. Hopefully you all can see it. If not, the question was, do organizations that have partners in the community have more weight? As Jorge said, no, that's not one of our criteria, but one of our criteria is that the organization has experience as a trusted leader in their community. And so if part of that for you is working with other partners in the community, it could influence depending upon how those partnerships work. I'm sorry, so the next question here.
And I think that's important, that part of being a trusted leader in the community, it's important. And it has to be very place-based, the work. And so it's really important to know the culture of the community, the values of the community, but also for the community to know who you are, and for you to have some experience working in the community that you want to target. And so if you have all those qualities, then this is like a really good, ripe type of RFP for you, even if you, or even especially if you don't have currently a Promotoras program, because then you can build one through this project. Yeah,
and I'll just add to that, having experience close ties to the target populations is another one of those that we definitely will be scoring on. If you don't have a current program or follow that sort of model, part of this RFP might be something that could help build capacity in your community to do so. What's most important is your strategy. That will be something that we are going to be scoring. So your strategy for how you're going to build that program to get that started in your community is what we're going to be looking at. So again, it's not a requirement that you have a Promotora model, but it is a requirement that you share with us your strategy about how you will build one.
Next question is, thank you, Wina. Is each Promotora to interact with all nest neighborhoods? If not, how will you ensure they're all included? Also, will you work with all Promotoras to ensure service research methodology is aligned so you have comparable data? Yes. Well, yes, with the last question. On the question on, will the Promotora interact with all nest neighborhoods? No. You can choose more than one nest neighborhood, but you're expected to work on the nest neighborhood that you select. We have many different programs related to the Climate Protection Fund, just like the city, that may cover some nest neighborhoods and not all, and some that may cover all the nest neighborhoods. So it's okay if this RFP, if everybody uses a different, chooses a different, and to work with a different nest neighborhood, we would only be able to cover 5. But it's okay. We think like with the limited funds that we have, that it would still be great for those 5 nest neighborhoods for us to pilot this project. If this is a really impactful project that we hope that it will, maybe we can expand it also to other neighborhoods or do another RFP to cover the other neighborhoods. But we only plan to do 5 RFPs and fund 5 RFPs with this pilot.
Yeah, and I'll just clarify, you can select more than one nest neighborhood. A lot of them do neighbor a little bit. Our goal here is to have the primary focus in these neighborhoods. And so I think there was an earlier question about it spilling out. Sure, we want to understand what that neighborhood or that community as a whole, what their attitudes and opinions and willingness to engage with climate action is. But really, again, our focus is in working in those nest communities where we have some local leadership.
Then the other that question also had, will you work with all promotoras to ensure service research methodology is aligned so you have comparable data? And that's the reason why we want to receive, prior to the 4-day training, the methodology that each promotora plans to use. And we're gonna be hiring a scientist, statistician to review those methodologies and make sure that they're all aligned and that they're all properly done, so that at the end of the day, we can compare those apples to apples and oranges to oranges. And so thank you. Good point. Does the evaluation component need to be in the budget presented, or is that separate funding? Is the evaluation component, we're gonna have our own, in terms of the trainer who's going to be evaluating, for example, the statistical methodology, we will provide those funds. We will provide the funding for the 4-day training also. You would have to just show up with your promotores and take the training. And you would have to produce the preliminary design of the campaign, submit it to us, and then also produce the final design of your campaign from the budget that you receive from us. You're expected to. I don't know if I answered that question, Joanna.
Joanna, if that did not answer your question, just drop in the chat for me. We can move on to the next one.
Then the last question is, how will branding and communication between the awarded programs be clear and concise to limit local burnout and confusion?
I'm not sure I follow that question. So how will branding and communication between the awarded programs be clear and concise? Is this more along the lines if there are two organizations that might be working on the same, in the same areas or neighboring communities, if you will? The branding and communication pieces, we're happy to provide support as far as what you might need to share information with this community, but it will be on each organization to kind of figure out how you're going to target your specific community that you select when you're completing the RFP. We are relying on our organizations in the communities as partners, knowing your community best, what works for you, how you can communicate with them, how they like to be communicated with. And so we definitely want to, help be co-creators of that process and not drive it. It might be different from community to community on terms of how you would be communicating with them. And so we just want to make sure that we are honoring what works for you, what infrastructure you already have in place, so that you have that freedom to interact with the communities in the way that they like.
Next, from Shannon, from the Spirit of the Sun, why is this RFP process so rigorous? There's questions, deadline, and a scientist is going to review and rate our methodology. Who is your scientist? This process sounds Western, scientific-based, and already biased. We are trying to just make sure that we can have accountability or just some clarity in terms of the impact that in terms of learning, for example, that the campaign has on the population. And I'm sorry, Shannon, if you feel like this is like too scientific. I think that's just one component of it. I think it's important for us who are working in the area of social ecology and working in the area of, the human environment on resiliency, to be able to be as rigorous as we can, as any engineering firm or any other sector in the field of renewable energy and urban forestry, for example. And one of the, the ways that we can do that to help us have like data-driven, science-based information to help us make better decisions is good surveys. And in order to have good surveys, you just need to do it properly. And it's just one component of the campaign. I hope that we can develop a model that is not a colonialist type of model from the perspective of First Nations. And I'm sure that there are ways that, from a non-colonial Western science perspective, that we could still do some good types of survey, and to also figure out how to measure the, the impact of surveys with Indigenous populations. And I wonder whether there might be already resources that might be available for you within your community of like researchers and Indigenous scientists who might be able to provide some resources that might be helpful.
And I can address the questions deadline. Every RFP has a deadline for questions to be submitted, so that is standard.
Yeah, I just saw another question on the evaluation. I don't understand what evaluation you mean.
So I believe the evaluation that they're referring to is once they have their idea of how they're going to survey the community and make sure that they have a sound methodology there, the evaluation of that is going to come from our end during the training portion. And so once you have your methods together, that it's a sound methodology that you're using, we will have an evaluator look at them. Jorge, correct me if I'm wrong.
Yes. And also in the training that we're gonna do, 4-day training, we're gonna have the evaluator is gonna be doing the training also. I'm giving authority for everybody to talk also. Shannon, go ahead.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Sorry, my Wi-Fi is lagging over here. I'm in BidNet, and so it's very unstable. But I just, I love we want to apply. It's just when I'm looking at this, like someone's going to, in Indigenous science, I know that there's correlations and overlap to, to Indigenous science, and having the impacts. But some of the things we can't evaluate based on our science, so it's a very, for me, I grew up in a different way, and I don't want to take time here, but it's just the way Western science and Indigenous science, the language and everything that we do as Indigenous peoples can't be measured in the Western scientific way. So it's just, for me, I'm having a hard time like trying to think that when we put something together, I know what's going to work, and I have to convince a scientist to rate us. I'm just, our methodology, that's what I'm having an issue with here. I just think that it's just a little, for me, I know we can do it, but just putting it down on paper in measurements, and we do evaluations and surveys, but to have a scientist rate what we're going to do, and if we get rejected, I just feel it's not a fair process. But you guys do what you need to do, and if someone could call me later on, like Jorge, I mean, you guys probably are not supposed to talk to us, but I'm just I'm a little frustrated and annoyed about this process, and it's so rigorous. And when we're trying to submit, we're a grassroots organization with a team of 4 or 5 people trying to impact larger scale projects, which we can do. It's just that this type of RFP makes it so much more formal to us to follow every little step, and it makes it overwhelming. And so it's just not very welcoming. You guys are fine. It's not very welcoming to what we have. And I just feel that it's so strict, and it's actually overwhelming. So, for us as a team too. So I just wanted to point out like what I'm thinking and my perspectives and my 2 cents and feedback. And I don't know if anyone knows me here though, but I am just to the point and direct, but I just feel that it's just too rigorous and too strict. And I just, large organizations will probably get this RFP, but for us, it's just tons of work in a short span of deadline. You know what I'm saying? But that's all I wanted to say. Thank you.
Shannon, thank you so much. One really important thing is that the sampling methodology part, that statistical part, is not really the most important part of this. Then another thing is that you're not going to be, a scientist is not going to evaluate you to select you for the RFP. So that you would be awarded the RFP regardless of what any scientist, we're not bringing any scientist to tell us. The scientists that we're bringing is additional resources. I hope that you can see it from that perspective, just to make sure that we can tweak, your surveys and your sampling. It's not going to be determinative in terms of whether or not you do the project moving forward. And I think that it's going to be, it's hard maybe for you to understand or to envision it, but you need to, I hope that you can trust us that we're going to be very flexible in like really accommodating and trying really hard to bring any additional technical support, not to take burdens away from you, but to improve the, the overall work of everybody. That's it. I hope that helps, but no scientists, we're not going to hire any scientists who will like reject your work. That's not the type of support that we're envisioning of bringing the trainer and the scientist.
Yeah, and I'll just
Okay.
add to just apply. Really, we want to hear from you what your vision is and how you want to, what your strategies are and where you want to take it. And then after that point, we want to be able to provide, as Jorge said, those additional resources and support. This sort of program, this model is, there's so many intangibles that we'll never be able to measure that we recognize and value as incredibly important when we're talking about engaging with the communities and relying on
Right.
our local
And
leaders.
I think my
Let me just add
is-
too, is that we as a city, we need to be able to demonstrate some metrics, right? And we don't want it to be too burdensome, but this is a way to evaluate the effectiveness of this program. One, to say, what worked and what didn't in terms of moving the needle as far as people's opinions and thoughts and behaviors toward climate change. But also to say, hopefully when this does work, here's a way that we can demonstrate that and increase capacity down the line. And so there is a definite need to have some sort of statistical data behind this. And we want to support you in getting that, and so that it's sound and we can demonstrate that, not just for all the organizations that are participating, but potential organizations down the line.
If I can add something to this, I think, because Shannon, I think all of my questions around evaluation were really leading to something of your point, in that like our promotoras are experts and embedded in the community, and while they have some evaluation training, I mean, they're talking to people, right? They are gathering oral history, those sorts of things, and those, those are as important. And particularly when you talk to our community, that's the way that we share stories, we share data, that sort of thing. And so I think from my end, I'm a little worried about the evaluation piece. One, having something sound from the start to present during the proposal, and two, during the actual implementation of the program itself, because I want to make sure that we are truly meeting community where they are and how they're used to interacting with us. I don't want them to suddenly have to fill out formal surveys or do formal data collection when they're used to speaking to our promotoras one-on-one and having these conversations. And so I think the process is not honoring the work that has already been done in the community, and how do we present a proposal that is, quote unquote sound, but also continuing the practices that are so valued here in this proposal, and that we are embedded and we have trust in the community because we don't do these sorts of things. We meet community where they are and speak to them where they are and do things the way that they've historically sort of been done, that are not necessarily honored in sort of scientific and evaluation methods.
And I just want to say that they're not mutually exclusive, and because we want to have some type of better understanding on the side of who you're surveying, doesn't make it like we're not honoring the way that you do your work and the work that has been done before. Again, this is not really like the most important part of this program. It's just one component. We think it's important, if we're going to be funding at this level, to like really try as best as we can to also get the data at the end of the day that can justify us keeping funding at this level moving forward. And we need to have information. It's not that I have worked most of my life on the other side from the community, and I know that there's a lot of equity and issues on confidentiality and information, and I can tell you that we are very committed to doing something respectful, and to co-creating something that everybody feels comfortable doing, from the side even of statistical analysis. And I hope that this is not something that scares you to the point that you wouldn't apply for the RFP. And I hope that if you apply, that you hold me accountable for what I'm saying, because this is something that we truly believe in, that we have to do things respectfully with our local promotores, subject matter experts. And I know that we can do something very, something in a way that everybody feels is done respectfully, but that also can produce, with confidence, the information that we want to demonstrate also. Because the idea is that we're going to use this information to bring more solutions, or to bring the solutions that the people want. And so this information will help us serve the people better. And that's the only reason why it's important for us to have this component in the RFP.
Yeah, and just one more thing to add. I think it's just really important to mention that our entire office is really, we're innovators. We want to be able to try new things and do things differently. And so, if this methodology part of it is something that we're finding doesn't work, I mean, that is great information to have as well. What we want to do with this RFP is partner with organizations, willing to try, trying to get some data from what we know has been a hard to measure sort of, piece of engagement and equity. We want to try. And so this is a big part of that RFP process. Let's see if we can continue to build capacity out in the community. Let's see if we can get some sound, solid information, from these efforts, so we know what to do with that information once we have it. That being said, Bridget, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that we will continue to take questions and feedback through BidNet. There is the opportunity to make amendments to this RFP, and so we are definitely open and willing to consider how else we might be able to address the measurement piece of this, because that is going to be an important component of this program.
Right. We're almost out of time, but I think there's one more question on the board.
Are City of Denver certifications taken into consideration for selection? No.
The
I
answer
don't
is
think
no.
so.
The answer is no. The Division of Small Business Opportunity Requirement does not apply to this RFP.
Thank you. I think
Okay, Bridget, can you wrap us up and let us know, let our attendees know next steps if they have any additional questions in the rest of the process?
Sure. All right. So in the absence of any other discussion, just the main things to remember is the deadline to submit questions via BidNet is May 4th by 5 p.m. We will respond to those questions by May 11th on BidNet, and then the deadline to submit the proposals is May 27th by 5 p.m. So please take notes of those dates, and we hope to see your proposals. Any final notes from you, Ahe?
thank you so much. Thank you everybody for participating. Thank you, Bridget. Thank you, Wina. And thank you all of you for joining us today.
Right. Thanks, everybody.